Hola, el día de hoy estamos aquí cerca de las oficinas de la iglesia, en el estudio, donde vamos a tener la oportunidad de grabar una entrevista única y por primera vez con un miembro del quórum de los 12 Apóstoles. El día de hoy tenemos a élder Bednar y vamos a hablar bastante acerca de lo que él habló en su discurso hace 10 años, llenar la tierra con el mensaje como si fuera un diluvio. Creo que aprenderemos mucho y estamos contentos de que Central de las Escrituras tenga la oportunidad que se nos ha dado por parte de la iglesia de poder llevar este mensaje. Así que veamos la entrevista con élder Bednar.
Could come quickly, but it's made up of a lot of little drops of rain.
Those opportunities going forward. The church has done a lot of things, a lot of campaigns.
I'm going to jump around a little bit. So help me if it's
that. They can't host regularly and turn into a full-time gig. They don't do it at all. And can you help us understand where's that?
all right. You okay here?
Rolling here? Yeah. Elder Bednar, appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
So 10 years ago, you gave a talk called Sweep the Earth as with the Flood, and you basically invited the members of the church to use the inspired tools of social media to share the gospel online. And personally speaking, and I'm sure these people here today can say the same, that inspired a lot of us to put ourselves online and really try and be a part of the work.
I'm glad to know that 3 people listen.
Yeah.
Frankly, though, it's a challenge. It's hard. We've talked about it personally. I've talked to many members of the church, and it's easier said than done to use these tools and to put yourself out in those vulnerable situations. And so we're excited to have you here, and we wanted to get a follow-up interview. 10 years later, let us know, how are we doing? What has changed? What can we do better?
Well, if I use numbers, we need to keep in mind that they're estimates. They sound more precise than they really are. But 10 years ago, there probably were about 2 billion people using social media. Today, that's more than doubled. Some people would say it's more than 5 billion people. We've made remarkable progress. If you consider, for example, President Nelson, his Easter and Christmas messages have gone to hundreds of millions of people. So that's the good news. The bad news is that the audience is now at least 2.5 times bigger. So even though we've made a lot of progress, we're not keeping pace with the evolution of social media. The nature of the content is different.
Yeah.
A lot of textual material initially. Now, textual material takes a distant second to short-form video. So it's not only the substance and the content, but the mode of delivery has changed a great deal as well. For me personally, I think the greatest thing is the inspiration that attended so many people in the church prior to COVID. Imagine where we would have been in the work of proclaiming the gospel if we had not started working with social media and digital content. It was a miracle how well things went during COVID, but we had to have a few years of practice to get ready.
Yeah.
So I think we've made remarkable progress, but this field moves so fast that we have to learn to run even faster than we're running.
Elder, you're talking about remarkable progress. Can you share with us some of the good things that you have seen online that have been going well?
I think we tend to emphasize what the leaders of the church are doing. Mm-hmm. And so we talk about the young women president and how many people are following her and so forth. All of that is magnificent. What I love the most is ordinary, unknown members of the church with very unprofessional, very authentic, short, simple messages of a bazillion different kinds. So a flood doesn't come, well, depending on the rainfall, it could come quickly. But it's made up of a lot of little drops of rain that aggregate very quickly. I think that's the right metaphor for what we're talking about. It's those little drops of rain from unknown people And to the degree that that gains momentum and continues to increase, then that helps us to keep pace.
And speaking of that, inviting members to be those little drops of rain, you mentioned we as members being authentic, just posting everyday messages about how the church, how the gospel has changed their lives. Is there anything that you would say that we need to focus on as members as far as what to post?
I wouldn't prescribe what people ought to do. I think as we focus on the work of proclaiming the gospel, we emphasize just be normal and natural. In regular conversations at work, simply describing what you did over the weekend, which included going to church and perhaps teaching a Sunday school class, that's very unusual to most of our friends who are not members of the church. So to describe the most ordinary things that we think everybody knows about, in many instances, hardly anyone knows about. So I would just invite people to be prayerful. Consider the normal, natural flow of your life. And what can you do about your life, about your family, about your children that highlights the gospel, but it's not an in-your-face, overt, come have the missionaries come to your home. Just live the gospel. Let some of that be in your social media posts, and it will create a curiosity. We live a distinctive lifestyle. And if we just have natural elements of that lifestyle, some folks are going to find that pretty interesting.
Concerning that lifestyle, to be authentic and what you're talking about, we love as members to see the brethren and general authorities be out there and do that. And we wanted to know a little bit more about that experience for you, to be influencers in a way, or like to share the gospel in simple ways.
Well, I'll give one example. I had one segment that was a day in the life of Elder Bednar. Mm-hmm. And what absolutely made me giggle was that a bazillion people online said, "What do you have in the bag at the end?" At the end, I was walking out of the church administration building just carrying a plastic bag. I don't remember what was in it. And even if I remembered, I wouldn't tell anybody. But they were, "What do you have in the bag? Was he going to the store for his wife? Did he have eggs in there? What was it?" That's what I mean about just normal and natural. The thing that's enjoyable about doing those is that it parts the curtain a little bit for people to see the normalcy of much of what we do. Obviously, we cannot record what takes place in our council meetings and other things, but to just see the flow of the day. I think people were surprised to see what was done in one day. I had another segment which was following us on a weekend. People said, "My goodness." And that really wasn't that busy of a weekend. So it's fun to help people just see behind the curtain a little bit. It's not a secret, it's not mysterious. It's really quite normal, and it's fun to be able to part the curtain.
It's fun for you, and I feel it's an example for all of us that we can do the same, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that when I've talked to members of the church is they kind of feel like they either have to go all in or not at all. They have to be an influencer, a content creator. They have to make these elaborate posts and edits. I feel like because they're worried that they can't be that, they can't post regularly and turn into a full-time gig, they don't do it at all. And can you help us understand where's that middle ground of just being consistently sharing your faith online?
Line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little and there a little. If an individual or a family would consider just their normal, natural routine, what's something that they would be interested in posting and just sharing? It doesn't have to be a gospel message. We are the gospel message.
Yeah.
I think it could help people to understand that what we do is much more important than what we may write or say. It may be that someone would simply highlight one aspect of a family home evening. And it might be that a young child, 6, 7 years of age would be giving a lesson. Now, we all think that's normal. That's abnormal. In a home, to have a child taking the lead in providing some instruction. Well, a few segments about that. A little commentary about, here's what we focused on. We were talking about prayer, because in our home, we believe prayer is important.
Yep.
And then have the little kid. What was it like for you to give this lesson? People would just be blown away to think that a 6, 7-year-old kid could give a lesson. So it's just so normal, natural, small increments, line upon line. That's how you get started. You gain a little experience, you see what works, what doesn't work. That's what we do. There are things that we say, let's try this. Well, that didn't work very well, but you learn something about what your next episode will be.
Speaking of posting and being consistent, that goes along with one of the 4 things that you mentioned 10 years ago. But when we try, or sometimes members try to post things like that, negative comments will come. You probably even saw it in your video of one day in the life of Elder Bednar.
Sure.
What can you tell us on how to react to these negative comments?
Oh, I have to do this and not sound snarky. I don't know how you translate snarky.
We'll find the right word, I promise.
And that is, you'll never be acknowledged, accepted, or recognized by everyone. It really doesn't matter what you do. Someone will find fault, be critical. And the question is, are you and I grounded enough to be able to receive that incoming flack and say, well, this person clearly didn't appreciate this post. But if what you did was true, it was you, then I don't see how you let that stuff bother you. We're not trying to please people. We're just showing aspects of our lives. And if they don't like it, there's nothing I can do about it. I don't control it. So my option is to not let it bother me too much. I think that works for everybody.
And that would probably go along with even spreading the message. Sometimes we invite someone and they disregard it. However, the invitation was made. And I think that's what is important. Isn't that what you're trying to say?
See, a part of what you're suggesting by the invitation, in everything in social media, it's a pull. It's not a push. You're not in their face. You're not deriding them or denigrating them because they don't respond to the message. If they choose not to pull it, or if they pull it and their choice is, I don't like this, we respect that. We can also learn from it. We may have said something in a way that after the fact we recognize, that probably wasn't as effective as it needed to be. I can see how someone might have not responded to that. So we learn a lesson, but you can't live in a world of constantly looking back, I wish I had. If that's what you wish you had, then do that the next time, and it will help it to become more effective.
One of the things that we notice is that general authorities, leaders are being more open about mental health. And you're also being more open and inviting to use social media. But I feel like right now, one of the challenges that a lot of people have is that it's hard to find a balance. Do you have any advice on how to maybe find that balance?
Social media can condition us to adopt patterns in our lives that are contrary to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that has a whole array of ramifications. So, we all know that institutions do research to find out how long someone sticks on a post. And it has to endure more than 1.7 seconds, or whatever the number is. That doesn't work very well with line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little, and wait upon the Lord. So people become conditioned. Nope, I've made I don't like this. Nope, I'm not sticking with this. Nope, I'm going to go over here. And they're moving so quickly from thing to thing to thing. They make conclusion judgments so rapidly. No, I don't want this. Nephi had to go to Jerusalem 3 times to obtain the plates of brass. Drew lots, tried it, didn't work. Gold and silver, riches, tried it, didn't work. Both of those, I would suggest, were necessary learning experiences for Nephi, so the 3rd time he could go not knowing beforehand the things that he should do. I wonder how many opportunities we miss because we only endure for 0.9 tenths of a second and make an immediate judgment. I listen to members of the church who say, well, I prayed and God didn't give me an answer. My experience is you typically don't get one answer, and you certainly don't get it quickly. You get lots of little answers over time. I think in the church when we talk about, well, I received an answer. No, I received a series of answers over time. But the world of social media almost negates that. So I think, this is what I'm saying, you asked about mental health. I think it's our overall intellectual and emotional and mental health. We have to be wary and not be seduced by the patterns that social media can introduce into our lives. Did that make any sense?
Yeah, it did.
Is it responsive to your question?
Yeah, I feel it is. Yeah.
Okay.
If I can change the topic from mental health, I grew up thinking that only messages from the church would be acceptable in my life. And probably it's that same thought is still out there. What can you tell us on how to find good, inspiring messages, and if we can consume anything else that is not coming from the church?
Again, let me begin with a short answer. We have to identify the sources from which they come and do the necessary homework to know if it's a trustworthy, reliable source. So sometimes you find members of the church who will find critical information on the internet about the brethren, about the church, about its doctrine, whatever it may be. People will say, well, Brother Bednar, what about that? And I say, well, who wrote it? And it's astounding to me that, well, I have no idea. I just saw it on the internet.
It was on
Well, if you don't know who wrote it, how can you possibly give it any credibility or credence? The lives of the brethren are pretty much open books. The life of Russell M. Nelson, who's almost 100 years old. You can read every sermon he's ever written. You know about his life, his background. Someone who's critical of him, where'd they come from? What's their background? What's their possible motive? If you don't know those things, you have to be wary of the information. And sometimes people are trying to obscure that because they don't want people to know. So I think it's incumbent upon us to exercise our agency to do the homework, to know what's the source, who's the author, to the best that we can discern and understand what's the motive. I'm simple-minded enough to believe that if we do that kind of work, the Holy Ghost will help us recognize and discern whether it's a good source or a bad source. President Nelson said early, in fact it was in his first message, that the day will come that the only way you'll know is by the power of the Holy Ghost. We're in that day. You can feel the difference if it's not real, things as they really are. Did I miss your question?
No, it was perfect.
That
Thank
wasn't
you.
perfect.
I've talked to a lot of members and asked the question, what impedes you personally from feeling comfortable putting yourself out there and sharing a bit of your faith? People that I've talked to, and me included, have felt this. We have family, friends, close people to us that don't agree with us, that don't believe in what we believe, that are even offended by the things we believe in. And that seems to be what impedes people the most, based on my research, is they are afraid of offending the people closest to them that they love. What advice do you have for them to help them get over that fear of sharing publicly because it might offend some people close to them that they love and affect those relationships?
We often talk about the spiritual gift of revelation as the what. Here's the answer to the prayer, here's the issue at hand, here's what I need to know so that I can move forward. I would suggest that many times it's not so much the what. The what may be very clear. It's the when. So I think there's a real need to seek for the wisdom, the judgment, and the spiritual discernment to know when you shouldn't, as much as when you should. Now, the what you do, each person has to develop that. But my experience is that the when to do is as important, maybe even more important, than what to do. So I would invite people to seek for the spiritual gift of discernment. That's more than just recognizing the difference between right and wrong or good and bad. Discernment is, by the power of the Spirit, recognizing the capacity inside of a person that perhaps that person has not recognized himself or herself, and the ability to help them recognize it and develop it. Now, I know that sounds like 80,000 feet in the clouds. But I believe that if you're thinking in those terms, it's not like I'm supposed to put a post out, so what do I say? Who's the person? Who's the audience? Yeah. What is it about this person that I love so much? What might be of benefit and a blessing? And you're not afraid of offending them. You're just trying to have the right message that might be at the right time of exactly the benefit that they need. I think that's a different frame than trying to think, well, I set a goal, I'm going to have 3 posts by the end of the month, and I can't figure out what to do in the third one. Yeah. That's not the issue. Who's the person? When does it make sense? And if that all lines up, here's what I might try to say.
Yeah.
Help me know if that is responsive.
Yeah, I think that's great. One of the very first posts I did, one of somebody close to me who was a little bit offended by what I had posted asked me, who's your audience? Who are you speaking to when you share these? And I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
And I said, that's a good question. I'm going to pray about that. And it helped me hone in my messaging and the way I presented and shared online, because I wasn't just putting it out to the world. I was thinking about who am I actually speaking to. And sometimes that's not going to be the people who are offended by and don't want to. Maybe it's somebody who really needs this particular message, but if you have in mind that audience in front of you, it changes the way you approach the messaging.
I believe, too, that if that pattern of trying to address the needs or the questions or the concerns of different audiences, people will pay attention to that, and across all of those different posts, they'll begin to see a part of what you're trying to do. I'm not blasting this to everybody everywhere. And all of a sudden, that helps them better interpret the intent of the message.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like a personal attack.
That's right.
When they start to see your intent.
Yeah.
So speaking of attacks, how can we be peacemakers in social media? I think sometimes it's hard for a lot of people to defend their faith, their beliefs, but also be respectful and a peacemaker. It's like a fine line.
Sure. I don't know that we have to defend it. I think we have the responsibility to proclaim what we know. But as we've said a little bit already, proclaiming is not in your face, and there's something wrong with you if you don't accept it as soon as I tell you. We learn about the gospel in increments, small increments over time. So, if you are a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if you are living the gospel, there will be people who do not agree with what you believe and what you do, and some of them will have a disposition to want to attack. You become a peacemaker when you don't respond in kind. Now, not necessarily on social media. If it's an interpersonal interaction, can you help me understand what's irritating you? What's upsetting you? What is it that you are concerned about? I think many times we have the propensity to respond, but we don't know what we're responding to. Can you help me understand where you're coming from with this? It seems like you're kind of attacking. Is this intended to be an attack? The fact that you're trying to clarify and understand where they're coming from is the first step in peacemaking. Because if there's an attack and a counterattack, it escalates.
Mm-hmm.
And so you and I have the control in many situations, not every situation, but in many situations, how we respond is the first step in de-escalating and trying to make it more calm and peaceful.
That's right.
I love that response. And Elder Bednar, quoting part of your talk from 10 years ago.
You got to get better stuff. better material.
It's great. But you said, I believe the time has come for us as disciples of Christ to use these inspired tools appropriately and much more effectively to testify of God, the Eternal Father, and His plan of happiness, His Son, Jesus Christ, as the Savior of the world, to proclaim the reality of the restoration of the gospel in these latter days. What inspired you to extend this invitation? And now, 10 years later, how has the invitation either changed or developed to continue moving this work forward through social media and the internet?
Every member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints should be a witness of Jesus Christ. But it's not so much what we say, it's what we do and what we are becoming that is bearing witness. So the invitation is for members of the church to do what they have covenanted to do. This is a vehicle, this is a channel, to stand as a witness of Him at all times and in all places and in all things. So it's not like, well, I do my social media church things, and I go to church on Sunday and do my church things. We are disciples 24/7, and we're always bearing witness of Him in the things that we think, in the things that we do, the places that we go, always. So the motivation for the invitation was, if we understand who we are and what we have as members of His church, this is a way to be able to declare that witness. And again, I think people think, well, I have to craft a message for it. No, you just have to let people see what you're trying to become.
I guess I understand a little more now what you mean by just posting an everyday thing. If we have made that covenant, if we have come to the waters of baptism and we understand who we are, we should not be posting or trying to impress anyone. It's just our everyday thing that we do because we have made that promise. Is that what I understand?
The scriptures describe us as a peculiar people. And I guess in the language of today, you'd say we're pretty weird. We live a lifestyle that the majority of the people look at and go, why would you live that way? And our answer is because it's the only way that you have enduring joy. You can do lots of things that produce temporary fun, but to have enduring joy in times both good and bad, only the gospel of Jesus Christ produces that. And we think that's normal. A lot of people think that's really weird. So if you take the scriptural phrase, a peculiar people, my language to describe that is, we need to let our weirdness work for us. And if we just live the gospel, you don't have to push it onto people. They say, you are really weird. Why do you live that way? And then there's an opportunity. It's a response to their question rather than us trying to push it on them. So if we just live the gospel, by definition, we're going to stand out from the patterns of the world in many ways.
So a lot has changed in those 10 years, like you were mentioning before. What's going to happen next? Social media is still changing. We are still finding a lot of challenges and also opportunities. What will be your advice on how to take advantage of those opportunities going forward? The church has done a lot of things, a lot of campaigns.
I'm going to jump around here a little bit, so help me if it's not making sense.
Yeah.
The amount of change that we have seen in social media in 10 years will be accomplished going forward in 2 years or 3 years. I don't know the exact time, but the amount of change will increase in ever shorter time periods. Now, the caution is, if we try to keep pace with all of that, that's all you'll ever do. You cannot keep pace. So in an intelligent, focused, selected way, you have to keep pace so that you have a sense of what's going on, but you can't know everything about it and don't need to.
Will you say that will apply also as a way to keep gathering Israel through social media, like keep sharing our faith and inviting others to Christ?
More so now than ever. I think the light that will be associated with the messages that come from authentic disciples of the Lord Jesus Christ will become ever more attractive in a world where people will use these tools to enhance the darkness. The light will shine ever brighter.
Thank you.
Would you be more specific on what you warn us as members about the pitfalls that posting and thinking about the content that we create, even when we are being authentic and simple in our post? What would you warn us about of these pitfalls that are potentially there?
Well, I think we've discussed a little bit about the blowback and the criticism and the attacks. I don't have simple advice other than that's just natural and normal. And I think some people can get to the point of almost being consumed with concern about this blowback that comes. And in a general way, I don't really know what to say to people to try to minimize that. And I don't want to make it sound as though it's not a big deal, because people can really have strong feelings about that. I just think that if you're focused on an audience and you use each post, each episode as an opportunity to learn, then you are improving, developing line upon line and precept upon precept. I personally find that engaging and enriching and energizing. If it just stops, I posted and I got slammed. You got to learn something from what it was that caused the slamming. And the learning from that episode, I think, is part of the essence of why we're here on the earth and what we're supposed to learn in everything that we do. A mistake is only a mistake if you don't learn something from it. If you learn something from the mistake and then do your best not to repeat the exact same mistake over and over, that's called learning. There's a fascinating approach to problem solving. Sometimes people will be hesitant and say, oh, I don't want to try this because I don't want to make a mistake. One way to more rapidly get to the solution to the problem is to try to make as many mistakes as you can, as fast as you can, to more rapidly get to the solution. Well, I'm not advocating that in social media, but I think there's something to learn from that approach and that pattern. When we have experiences that don't turn out the way we had hoped or anticipated, there's a lot to learn from that.
From what you're saying, I could not stop thinking that a safe thing to post for us would be about Jesus Christ. There's still out there a lot of people that don't think that we are Christians. Is there anything that you would suggest to us on how to include Jesus Christ on every post that we do?
For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's who we are. I've already said it. It's not Sunday only. It's all day, everywhere, all times, all places, all things. Now, how we do it can't be the same in every setting. And it's not just an overt act, it's what we are striving to become. And that becomes evident to anybody who sees us.
I love it.
On that note of kind of pitfalls, I think one of the challenges I see people falling into, even myself, is we start to feel inadequate or insecure about our ability. Like, who are we? Who am I to share about? I'm not an apostle. I'm not a seminary teacher. And I think that's another reason why a lot of us members just don't ever start to engage. It's because we don't feel like, are we going to do it well? Are we going to say it doctrinally? Are we going to make a mistake? And so we just get paralyzed. What advice do you have for those of us who feel those insecurities and that inadequacy to share the gospel?
Well, number one, I'm not sure that this is the avenue for proclaiming, every element of the doctrine.
Right.
So I think to keep it pure, if we keep it pure, we keep it simple. It's easy to do your homework to know that you are expressing it the way the Lord and His servants and His church would want it expressed. I think the homework that one does can give you the confidence to know that you're not stepping outside the bounds. So I think that's the beginning point. The other thing is that the principles of the gospel are really simple, and there's a lot of stuff that we don't know. I think it's almost as important to know what we don't know as it is to know what we do know. So if it's an area where there's some uncertainty about, do we really know this? Don't mess with it. Stick with the simple things that we know. Yeah. Those can be verified. And then I think all of that uncertainty or that concern can be eliminated.
Yeah, like that. And I think you've already addressed the other half of that, which is focus less on what to say and more on who you are and sharing how the gospel works in your life.
Yeah, if what you're doing, you may recall the talk that President Eyring gave as a member of the Quorum of the 12 early in his service about if you will pray and ask God to help you to see His hand in your life every day. If you do that at the end of the day, he promised, he said, you'll look back and reflect and see how God has reassured, comforted, rebuked, helped you in some way during the course of the day. And I have listened to countless numbers of people who have taken that counsel and testified that I have seen things in my life that I previously had not seen or recognized. Yeah. Well, simply sharing something like that. From your own experience living the principle, you don't need to declare the principle per se, but in the process of describing your experience with the principle, you are declaring it and making it relatable.
Yeah, I love that.
And how do we protect our friendships and families from threats coming from social media?
Well, I think that goes back to what we've discussed about the attacks. I think the value is, however, that you've got everybody in your family to rally in support and to assist. So it's not just one person being attacked and how do I deal with that. You may have parents and siblings and extended family members that it can assist in helping to allay the concern about whatever the person said that was an attack. They can help analyze it, help understand, I really don't think this is something you need to take too seriously. This is somebody who's, for whatever reason, choosing to fire back, doesn't say anything about you, doesn't say anything about who you are or what you are. So we love you and don't worry about it.
Elder Bednar, at the beginning, Parker mentioned that after your address at BYU, some of us were inspired to do this, and now we are doing it. And there were also some organizations created through Millennial, More Good, Scripture Central.
Yeah.
Sometimes members may think that they need to be part of an organization to post. Do they have to be part of an organization or basically just go and post?
I think it's a little bit of both. At the beginning, they may have no idea how to do this. They may not know anything about how it works. So they go, well, if I put this up, what happens? Well, they ought to come to somebody like you and say, help me learn how to navigate this thing on the front end to get started. What would you teach me about doing my first post? How do I think about it? So that plays a very important role. Once that's done, then my answer is, you don't have to be a part of anything. You're going to be representing something. You're going to represent you as a person. You're going to represent your family. You may end up representing what you believe about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and being a disciple of Christ. So there's a lot of things to consider. I think your organizations help people navigate and learn about that process. I think that equips them then to move forward and just be weird and do what they're going to do in a natural and normal way.
We show them how weird we are. And hopefully they...
Well, that all started with me because I'm the weirdest of the bunch.
Well, you're the greatest example, Elder Bednar. And is there, what would be your invitation as we are wrapping up to the world 10 years later?
My invitation would be, don't make this harder than it is. Don't complicate it. If you don't know what to do, there are plenty of sources where you can get some basic information about how do I think about doing this and how do I get started, and then do it. It's not hard, it's not complicated, it's a remarkable learning process. I am surprised, I have some experience with this, I'm surprised to see how people react to various things. We talked about that at the very beginning, what's in the shopping bag. That's a delightful process to try something, learn from it, learn how to do it better, and then continue to do it. So, it's not hard. Keep it simple. Don't be afraid to give it a go. There are great sources to get some help if you're just getting started. And this is not going away. This is the way the world works now. I've said to missionaries in the field, we began in 2013-14 introducing digital devices for missionaries to use. And a part of what I said to them is, this is not just about doing your missionary work now. You need to learn how to use these tools for righteousness now, so that will be your pattern throughout your entire life. This is how the world communicates, and you need to learn how to do it for righteousness.
Thank you, Elder Bednar.
Thank you for sharing all this knowledge with us.
Thanks, this is fun.
It is fun.
It's very valuable.
Yes.
Thank you. So Chad, out of that, can you get 2 minutes of stuff?
Barely. Yeah, barely. No,
It's going to be a stretch.
No, not at all. Thank you.